Imagine going through the hardest moment of your existence, completely alone on the road, with no one waiting for you or missing you. And right there, when not even a spark of hope remains, a woman appears at a lonely bus stop, asks you for a ride, and what seemed like a simple act of courtesy ends up changing the course of your life. My name is Tomas. I'm 57 years old, and ever since I lost my wife 3 years ago, I feel like I've become a shadow. My son drifted away, my friends disappeared, and I kept driving as if the tires of my truck were the only ones that still knew the way. That afternoon, I was heading back from Ciudad Valles to Zacatecas. The heat was intense, though it felt worse inside than out. I stopped at one of those small, always empty roadside diners, just to drink tasteless coffee and pretend I had a reason to keep moving. That's where I noticed her, a petite woman, wrapped in a dark shawl, standing by a bench. Her wrinkled face showed her years, but her eyes shone with a gentle glow. In a soft voice, she asked if I was headed to Zacatecas. I said yes. Then she mentioned a town called Villa Hidalgo. It caught my attention. That was exactly on my route. I told her I was passing through there and asked if she needed a ride. She said only if it wasn't a bother, that she didn't want to inconvenience me. I told her to get in, that it was no trouble. She thanked me with a slight nod, climbed in carefully and sat in silence. The atmosphere inside the truck changed, as if the engine's noise had softened. We didn't speak for several minutes. I didn't know how to start a conversation. I wasn't used to company, much less someone so serene. Soon, she was the one who broke the silence. She asked if I always drove alone. I nodded. For many years now. She asked if it didn't affect me. I told her you get used to it. She looked at me with a gentle expression and said, "It's not habit, it's hardening. They're not the same." Her words hit me like they'd struck right at the wound. I told her that since my wife's death, I'd just been moving forward. She asked if I really believed my wife was completely gone. I laughed bitterly. I said yes, that with her, everything that had meaning had left. She didn't judge me. She just held that kind of silence that comforts. Then she asked about my son. I told her he didn't speak to me, that he blamed me, maybe rightfully so. Sometimes, the ones we love most are the ones who hurt us the worst when we fail. I swallowed hard. Her words weren't sermons. They were truths wrapped in kindness. I asked if she was traveling alone. She said she always goes where she's needed. That place was by my side. I glanced at her. Her hands were folded in her lap, as if she were praying. "You need me," she said, "more than you realize." We sat in silence for several minutes, but her presence felt like a warm blanket over a heart that had been frozen for years. With a lump in my throat, I confessed that I no longer believed in anything. Not in God, not in miracles, only in enduring. She wasn't surprised. She replied, "God isn't offended when we grow tired of him. He stays close, in silence, waiting for us to make room for him again." Something inside me broke, not from sadness, but relief. I asked how she knew all this. She looked at me with a serene peace that can't be bought or taught, and said she'd once been in that same place, that someone had picked her up when she needed it most. In that moment, for the first time in years, I felt I wasn't alone anymore. The road ahead was still straight, but inside me, something had begun to shift. She never told me her name, and I never asked. It wasn't necessary. Sometimes, the soul recognizes before the mind does. We were passing through a stretch of dry hills, and the sun was beginning to set. The sky had that orange hue that looks like it's been painted. She gazed out the window, calm, as if she already knew every curve. She asked if I always took that route. I said almost always. I preferred it because there was little traffic. Fewer people, fewer complications. She smiled and said, "Yes, fewer people, but also more silence." What do you hear when everything is silent? That question cut deep, as if she'd read my soul. No one had ever asked me that before. I hear my own thoughts, and honestly, they're not good company. She stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, "Sometimes the loudest noise doesn't come from the engine, but from the chest when it screams and no one hears." My chest tightened and I slowed down. The air grew heavy. I wanted to change the subject, to hide again, but she spoke with a softness that seemed to weave peace into every word. And do you live alone? I asked. I take care of children at a shelter near Villa Hidalgo. They are my home. Doesn't that responsibility weigh on you? Sometimes, yes, but when it's done with love, the weight becomes purpose. That's when I realized she wasn't an ordinary person, not because of what she said, but how she said it, as if her words had been waiting a long time to find me. A few minutes passed, and she looked at me with an expression that enveloped me. May I ask you something, Tomas? Of course. Would you let me pray with you before I get out? I was speechless. It had been so long since I prayed, not since I buried my wife, and I was afraid I'd break. I don't have faith, I muttered. God doesn't need you to understand him. He believes in you, even if you don't believe in him. I nodded, not trusting my voice to hold. She held out her hand. I hesitated, but ended up taking it. It was warm, not like the mild skin of an old woman, but warm as if there were fire inside. I startled. I was about to pull away, but she squeezed it gently. Don't be afraid. What you feel is love. Then she began to pray. I didn't understand every word. She didn't use grand or elaborate phrases, but each one sounded like a whisper that reached straight into my heart. I felt something open inside me, something that had been shut for far too long. I cried, not with the rage of someone holding back. I cried like a child who finally finds familiar arms. When she finished, she let go of my hand. I was trembling. She looked at me and said, "Now you can keep going." We drove a few more kilometers until we reached a curve with an old blue gate and a rusted sign that read home, "Hope, bright star." This is where I get off. Thank you, Tomas. No, thank you. I don't know what you did, but something inside me changed. She smiled, one of those smiles that heal. I only reminded you what you already knew. You were never alone. She stepped out and walked toward the entrance. A child ran to her and hugged her. Then, without looking back, they went inside together. I got back on the road with my soul in pieces. But for the first time in years, I felt those fragments want to come back together. Days passed, then weeks. I kept driving, hands on the wheel, but with a different heart. I couldn't explain it in simple words. It was as if something inside me, long asleep, had woken up, as if that prayer had planted something that was now beginning to bloom. The first sign came on an ordinary night, while I unloaded sacks at a warehouse in Aguascalientes. My old phone rang. No one had called me in weeks. When I saw the screen, I froze. It was my son. My heart pounded against my ribs. I answered, voice cracking. "Son." Silence. Then, "Dad," finally. "Are you okay?" I didn't know how to reply. I couldn't remember the last time someone had asked me that. We didn't talk long, but it was enough for something broken in me to start mending. From then on, everything began to shift, not like magic, but like something up that was putting the pieces back in place. My back pain, which used to keep me awake, began to ease. The mechanic who always overcharged me forgave a debt. I was even offered a better paying route with fewer hours on the road. None of it made logical sense, but it all carried the same scent, hope. And every time something good happened, I thought of her, the woman in the shawl, her burning hand, her prayer. I started to wonder who she really was. One day, I returned to the same roadside diner where I picked her up. I stepped inside and asked the clerk if he knew an older woman who hitchhiked. He gave me a strange look. Hardly anyone stops here, let alone women alone. But she was here. She spoke to me, asked for a ride to Villa Hidalgo. He shook his head. Only empty trucks and exhausted souls stop here. A chill ran through me. I kept driving, but doubt began to grow like a thorn in my side. Was she real? Did I imagine her in a moment of need? Was it a dream? But her voice, no dream could replicate that peace. One night, parked at a deserted rest stop, I dare to speak to God after so long. I don't know if you're there or if you're listening, but if she was what I think, thank you. And if she wasn't, thank you anyway, because what she left in me gave me back the will to live. A soft breeze slipped to the window, and I felt a gentle warmth in my chest, like an invisible hand brushing my soul. That's when I knew I had to go back to the orphanage. I had to see her again, thank her, confer with my eyes what my heart already sensed. I didn't know what I'd find, but I understood that no matter what, I wouldn't walk that road alone anymore. Since that prayer, I returned to the shelter with my heart pounding. I had no idea what to expect, but I needed answers. After everything, I couldn't keep dragging that doubt like a dead weight. The road led me back to Villa Hidalgo. I recognized every curve, every rusted post, every stretch I'd once driven with her beside me. When I saw the faded blue gate, I knew I'd arrived. I stopped in front of the children's home. The sign was the same, Refuge Home, Star of Hope, but something was different, as if time had stopped. I knocked hard on the gate. After a moment, a young woman appeared. She was in her 20s, wearing a white smock, her face tired. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. "I'm looking for a woman who used to run this place. Dark-skinned, short, wore a dark shawl. Months ago, I drove her here." The woman frowned. "I'm sorry, but there are only two of us here, me and Sister Teresa, and she's tall, blonde. Are you sure it was this place?" "Positive. I dropped her off right at this gate. A little boy ran out to hug her. She told me she cared for the children here." The young woman studied me with unease. "Sir, this place was closed for nearly 10 years. We reopened 6 months ago, and there are no children living here yet. We're still renovating." The air left my lungs. It couldn't be. I'd seen her, seen the children, felt her hand, prayed with her. The woman fell silent, then looked down. "Would you like to come in? You seem upset." I nodded without speaking. Inside, the place was clean and orderly, but empty. No toys, no laughter, no signs of life. On the wall near the entrance hung a framed picture. I stepped closer, and the world froze. It was her. The image was a Virgin of Guadalupe, her blue mantle draped over her shoulders, her expression serene. I couldn't believe it. I stood there, legs shaking, unsure whether to laugh, cry, scream, or kneel. "Who put this here?" I asked, voice breaking. It was already here when we arrived. No one knows who left it, but we decided not to take it down. It's like this place belongs to her. I covered my mouth. Tears spilled without warning. I leaned against the wall and sobbed like I hadn't since my wife's funeral. She had been her. I, who never believed, who used to mock faith, who thought heaven had forgotten me, had given the Virgin of Guadalupe a ride, and she never let me go. From that day on, everything changed. I was never the same. After seeing that portrait, I understood some things defy logic. Moments you never planned, but that transform everything. I, who believed in nothing, had been met by someone who knew me long before I could even imagine her. For days, I didn't speak to anyone. Not my son, not other drivers. I just drove and thought. I relived every second. Her words, her gaze, her prayer, the warmth of her hand, the child who hugged her, the blue gate, all of it. What if it was just an illusion? What if my mind invented her? But no, it wasn't fantasy. You don't invent something you don't understand yet feels so deeply true. One day, at a truck stop in Guanajuato, I saw a fellow driver crying silently over a letter. His daughter had died. I sat beside him. At first, I said nothing, just stayed there. When he spoke, I told him my story. Not to convince him, but like sharing a scar that was once a wound. I told him about the woman, the prayer, the shelter, the portrait. He didn't laugh or doubt. He just wept harder. And when he caught his breath, he hugged me. "Thank you for reminding me there's still hope." That's when I knew my purpose. It wasn't about building altars, plastering my truck with holy images, or turning into a preacher. My road was to be there, to listen, to accompany, just as she had done for me. Now, I carry a small image of the Virgin of Guadalupe with me, not displayed. It's folded in my wallet like a sacred secret. When someone shares their pain, I don't show the image or preach miracles. I just listen, and if the moment feels right, I take their hand and repeat the prayer she taught me, word for word, silence for silence. Some cry, others just sigh, but they all feel what I felt, they're not alone. And neither am I, because now, every time I start the engine, every mile I travel, every night I spend rolling to the darkness, I feel her with me. Not beside me, not as a vision, but within in the deepest part of me, like a light guiding even the darkest roads. 2 years passed. My son came back. We hugged like the distance never existed. I became a grandfather. And sometimes I pull over for days. I step out of the truck, walk, breathe, and look at the sky, not to ask, but to thank. Yet I still felt something was unfinished. So one dawn, I pointed my rig toward Mexico City. No cargo, no hurry, just my story. I reached the Basilica of Guadalupe on a Tuesday. Pilgrims filled the plaza, barefoot, clutching rosaries, families with children, teens with phones. I entered quietly, sat in the back, and let time pass. When I was ready, I walked in front. There she was, the same face, the same tenderness. I didn't speak. I just knelt, closed my eyes and prayed in whispers, not memorized words, but what spilled from my soul. Thank you for not letting me drown. Thank you for stepping into my truck in silence. Thank you for showing me the road still stretched ahead. A peace beyond explanation washed over me, as if my wife, from some corner of heaven, was listening too. I stood, walked into the sunlight, took a deep breath, and knew I needed no more answers. Real love doesn't demand explanations. To you reading this, maybe you're navigating a hard curve in life. Maybe you're driving through days with a tired soul or pain no one understands. Maybe you stopped believing. Maybe you never did. And that's okay, because the Virgin of Guadalupe doesn't come only for those with faith. She comes for the exhausted, the doubters, the ones who stop waiting. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic, Christian, skeptical, or just searching for meaning. What matters is that you keep going. Do good. Walk with humility. Hug when you can. Listen when you're needed. And if one day a woman in a shawl smiles at you on the highway, don't be afraid. Maybe she's just a traveler. Or maybe it's her the one who's never left you.